realize, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor pulls the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Machine Pun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hey there, Machine Pun Kelly here. Don't have a guest today. Just wanted to take some time and address all the stupidity that's coming out of the Trump administration about Signalgate, which is in itself stupid. And the only question that we have right now is which is dumber, Signalgate itself or the defense of Signalgate. And it's like the Signalgate apologists that are saying things like, oh, you know, there was classified information that wasn't shared, so it wasn't classified, as though like if all the classified information isn't shared, then that means none of the information that was shared was classified. Okay, they did not say what exactly, you know, they didn't give the coordinates of where the strike was happening, but they gave what kind of plane it was going to be. You know, I mean, and they knew like within a few minutes of when it was going to happen, and they knew the guy that they were going to attack, and they knew where that guy was. So it's not like it was a huge stretch. And if somebody had found out about it, then yeah, they would have known what was happening and where it was happening. It's like saying that, oh, well, I didn't get in an accident while I was driving home drunk, so what's wrong with drunk driving? Which is probably something Peter Hagsmith says every single fucking day. So, you know, there's that. And, you know, I just like cannot wrap my head around something like this, to where you have, you know, like people like that are senators that cannot seem to fathom the idea that even saying black is black and white is white is this is not a partisan thing. This is a very actual thing. That's like, it's a thing. It's like pointing up and saying that is up, and pointing down and saying that is. This is not a controversy. This is Care Bear, by the way, who is sorry, I got my green screen situation. I'm trying to set it up and it's not quite working yet, but I do have a guest, I guess. That's Care Bear. He's my cat and he's adorable. Anyway, I cannot get my head around it. You got what's her name, the press secretary person whose name I keep blocking out because I just would rather not remember it, saying that it's all like the Democrats are. What is wrong with like the right half of the country right now? Like, can we like not even accept reality? Trump, you know, and here's the thing nobody's talking about. Trump didn't even seem to be aware of what was going on. How come nobody's talking about that? Shouldn't like the president of the United States know what's happening when we're about to attack another country? Like, the vice president was on the call. The secretary, I don't know what the fuck the Secretary of State was doing on that chat. There was all kinds of people. It's not just that there was this signal chat. Why is the White House chief of staff involved in coordinating this attack or whatever? Like, there's so much that's wrong with it. It's like there's just layers and layers and layers of stupidity. And then the reaction is even more stupid. It's like, how much stupid can they contain in one administration? And it's like all of it. This is the dumbest group of people that have ever run a country anywhere in the history of the planet. They are so dumb that they couldn't play tic-tac-toe and win. They're that dumb. They can't even draw X's and O's in tic-tac-toe. They are so dumb that if you gave them 3 shovels and told them to take their pick, they would spend all day trying to find a pick. So how come we're not talking about these things? How come we're not talking about the real thing? And now you've got, the moron in chief that's sitting there talking about, okay, they're sending Vance to Greenland now or something. I don't even know what's going on with all that. And you've got all these people that are like, and now we're going to, Trump is threatening to jack up the tariffs on Europe and Canada if they respond. And it's like, why? Yeah, it's like, why isn't Canada putting America first? That's the way the MAGA responds to it. It's like the entire world has to revolve around Donald Trump. And if they don't, then it's like they are attacking America. It's like Donald Trump is right about one thing. The guy that negotiated the treaty with Canada is an idiot. I don't know, he's the one that did it, and they just don't even care about that. They just, they just have to find something to be angry about because they don't have a life if they're not angry about something. You can't own the libs now because they got everything. So now they just got to own Canada, and they got to own Greenland, they got to own Europe, they got to own Yemen, they got to own everything. They're a bunch of morons. Morons, agitated, whatever, I don't know. So yeah, I'm getting kind of frustrated now. So I wanted to come on and vent a little bit. Hey, Golf. Whiskey Leak and the DUI hires a MAGA. And they are. They are. Can we please get the black guy back? He knew what he was doing. Except, the first thing he sees in the morning and the last thing he sees at night when he closes his eyes is a bottle of Jack. He is... he's not even qualified to drive a fucking car because he's drunk. Why is he Secretary of Defense? And you got the stupid woman sitting there going, who do you trust more, the Secretary of Defense or the writer of the Atlantic, the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic? It's like, that's asking me whether I trust, Peter Hegseth or Jeffrey Goldberg. Obviously the answer is Goldberg. I do not trust Peter Hegseth. I do not trust him to even drive a car, much less defend the nation. And it's not like there's not evidence. The guy, Goldberg, showed the screen caps, and they're acting like this is a hypothetical situation or something. And it's like federal phones, the kind of phones that they would use for government phones, they literally cannot run signal. You can't put signal on those. You can't run signal on there. So these were being done on private phones. That means you could, if somebody hacks your phone, they have access to all that information. Or if you just have people sitting by, when I worked with Google, I used to have access to confidential information, like before Google TV came out. I wrote the Help Center articles for Google TV, and there was a lot of interest in Google TV. Everybody wanted to know about it. And if I had leaked that information by, texting about it on my phone or something with somebody else that I worked with, I would have been fired. You have to go through all these trainings all the time being told, no, don't do this, don't do that. And it's like, they're talking about a military strike. I don't care what information they did not share. The information they shared was classified, and it was the kind of thing that you should be in a skiff. It's not just kind of classified, it's extremely classified. And anybody that's ever worked in classified information knows that's classified information. So when you have people that have had access to classified information sitting there lying through their teeth and saying it's not classified, then that's insane. We're just, these people would sell out their own mothers, and a lot of them did. A lot of these MAGAs did sell out their own mothers for Trump. What is the attraction? He's fat, dumb, stupid, and orange. Why? Why? It's not like there's anything gained by it. What is the I know I'm not the only one frustrated, but I just had to yell. So anyway, all right. So I'm gonna go. Thank you guys for coming and commenting because I needed to interact with somebody about this. As a matter of fact, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do this. All right. This is. If anybody wants to come on and talk to me, this right here, just click on that link, and I'll let you on, and we can have a chat. So, and then, yeah, okay. So I'm gonna read through some of these. Oh, Mr. Crowley, how you doing? Can I sing your name, Mr. Crowley? I wish there was a way to support you and day drink my way through this administration. Oh man, I quit drinking, but boy, have I wanted to start again. So yeah, it's like insane. Every day it's like a fresh level of insanity. And we're not even 2 months into it yet. It's like how much more like, you know, I don't even know if we're still going to exist as a world by the time 2028 rolls around. Like 2028 may roll around in some ways like the actual number of times that the earth will circulate around the sun, you know, so that you know, like it will be technically 2028, but a civilization that acknowledges that it's 2028, much less an election that comes in 2028, may never happen. Like we could literally just all be dead by then. So Egolf here, they had Wyckoff in Wyckoff was in a signal chat in Moscow waiting for Putin, and he's talking about strikes. It's like, oh my goodness, that's like a level of stupid that is like, I mean, if I had written that in a fiction book, nobody would have looked at it. They would have just been like, this is just too stupid. No, this couldn't happen. Waiting for Putin. Mobile phones are the weakest links in digital info. And that's true. It's true. I mean, it's not that, and they, you know, like the federal phones, they like work on a different server, and so like they don't work on Twitter. You can't use Signal on those federal phones. They had a guy on the call with a private chat group in Moscow. Yes. I mean, and they were like, "Oh, it was safe." And then they're like, nobody, you know, and they want to. My other favorite thing is like the way they go, well, we were trying to figure out how he got on the chat, and it's like, okay, number one, we don't need to figure out how he got on the chat, right? It says right fucking there that he got on the chat because Wyckoff put him on the chat, added you to the chat. It says it right there. It's like there is no mystery involved in that. But number two, it's worse if he got on the chat. Like that just proves why it's unsecure. Right? Like if he could get on the chat, if like just some slob can get on the chat, you shouldn't be having the chat about national security information. I'm relaxing by having more coffee, Mr. Crowley. So, all right. I don't always include random reporters and unsecured. Yes, that's one of my. There. Okay, so like, there's my favorite ones, and that's one of them. I don't always include then there's the one about you know, to text. You know, if you don't want to continue receiving national security information, you know, reply stop to not get any more messages. And then there's the one with Big Bird, and he's walking along with the stormtroopers and Darth Vader and everything. There's been like the one good thing about it is there has been some really, really funny takes on it. I have secured my property in Tennessee like it's free dairy. Oh my goodness, you're in Tennessee. You need to meet Seth if you haven't already. Seth White. If you're not following him or co-followers, he's in Tennessee. Like I always say, Tennessee is pound for pound just as stupid as Texas and Florida, but it doesn't get nearly as much credit. And Senator Wheathead, you know, Marsha Blackburn, I call her Senator Wheathead. She is like, I mean, if you planted her in the ground, she would not know how to get out. Like, I mean, just buried her feet deep. But Pam Bondi says it won't be investigated because that's sorry was successful. Yes, I got drunk and drove home, and I got home successfully. Therefore, I did not create any danger to the world by getting drunk and driving home. That's the mentality of that. That's like, I agree. I'm glad you brought that up, Fulton's, because that's the mentality that they're bringing to it is like, well, nothing bad happened, therefore it wasn't a bad thing that happened. Yeah, well, you got away with it. Doesn't mean that it wasn't stupid. And also, I would like to point out that Pam Bondi is too busy threatening congressmen for exercising free speech and saying bad things about Elon Musk. Oh, yeah, we do meme better. I love it when they say Democrats can't meme. And it's like, okay, first of all, memeing is not, like Republicans don't meme. What they do is they steal memes that Democrats did, then they repurpose them, and then they act like they're being creative. They if you were to, put all of the creative power of the entire Republican MAGA universe into a thimble, you wouldn't even be able to fill the thimble. I mean, there would be like about a thimble's worth of room left afterwards. Sharia Light, America. We had to get Gloria J, but the leopards, man. I think that you must be talking about the leopards eating faces. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen my song about the why did the leopards eat my face? Anyway, it's on my channel. You should check it out. It's a pretty funny. I mean, I didn't write the music, but the music really nailed it. I just wrote the lyrics, and the music just really popped it. So yeah, I just like, and you have to wonder, where do we go from here, right? How do we, like, one thing I'll say about this that is interesting to me is they can't seem to roll into the next controversy about it. Like this one's kind of like had more staying power than most of the criminal acts, and I don't know why it is that this one right here is, because it's not, I mean, it's weird when you start trying to, like say, is this the worst one yet? Because each one is equal. I mean, you would think that things like, keeping national security secrets in the shitter would be about as bad as it could get, but we get worse and worse. And it's like, and so how does this compare to that? Or, compared to getting convicted of the felonies or trying to overthrow the country, like, I think January 6th, and I mean, like, not just January 6th, but like, people talk about January 6th and they call it the insurrection, but the insurrection was not just what happened on January 6th. The insurrection was everything that happened around January 6th too. It was the whole, what was the Green Bay sweep of it all. It was a whole plan to try and overthrow the country. And January 6th and the actual attack on the Capitol building was an aspect of that plan, but it was only a part of the plan. That was just a play in the playbook. The everything else, with the fake certificates and the fake electorates and the lies, the countless lies to sow this kind of doubt about it, and all of that, was all part of an insurrection. So it was definitely an attempt by Donald Trump to overthrow the country. Don't make any mistake about that. But, like we call January 6th the insurrection. And so then they, the way that they parse things, they're like, oh, well, were all these guys, without guns going to overthrow the country? And it's like, no, they weren't, but that wasn't the whole thing. They love to, and then, okay, yeah. So they love to invoke Reagan, but Ronnie would throat punch Trump. Ronnie would. And Ronnie, like, here's the thing, like I always think about this. Reagan said, tear down this wall. And Trump said, I will build a great wall. Like, That right there, that's the contrast. That's all you need to know is and it's you've got uh Reagan tried to, Reagan wasn't really the one that destroyed or that took down the USSR. I think it was actually Gorbachev should get the credit for that. But maybe Reagan helped a little bit. I don't think he's the champion that the Republicans claim him to be, and I think that Reagan was the seed, and Trump is the fruit of the tree. But yeah, I don't think Reagan would like Trump. I think if he were around today, he would be like a Lincoln Project guy. I think that Trump has gone places that Reagan wouldn't, and I am not a fan of Reagan. But I'm not a fan of Bush either. Bush too, either Bush. But Trump has gone places that they never did and never would. When Bush lost, he conceded. Like there's that. Bush won. I mean, so uh, Reagan refused to allow Donald to visit him in the White House. They would call Reagan a commie rhino after his amnesty for yeah, right. And there's a whole other thing that a lot of people don't seem to know. I wish do they even teach American history anymore? If you go back and you look at the history of asylum, especially from Central America, and you look at the illegal immigration history and stuff, and you look at some of the court cases, a lot of people might be surprised that the ones that were defending asylum and trying to get the illegal immigrants that were defending them were actually the Lutheran Church and the right wing evangelicals. It's only under Trump that there was this shift to where there was just so much animosity towards undocumented workers. And even like under Bush too, if you remember, there was like some talk about we need to do some reform, and and then they would talk about they're doing the jobs that Americans don't want to do, and then there was some talk about that, and that's why it didn't get done, is the Republicans didn't know what to do. They weren't against the immigrants the way they are now. And so it's just all a thing that Trump has ginned up, and I don't know how it happened. Like there were people I know that used to not have an issue with undocumented workers, and now they act like, oh my God, the world's gonna fall apart if I see another Mexican in my life. Yeah, it does feel off defending Reagan, and it does. I mean, and it's like he's a little piece of shit and Trump's a big piece of shit. I mean, it's like it's a scale thing, not a whether he's good or bad. He's just not as bad. And I try to think about, I think like the tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev speech, I gotta say that was pretty good. And he without his help, I don't think that the Brady bill would have ever gotten passed. But I mean, he kind of got shot, so maybe he had some personal stuff involved there. But I think there were some good things with him on gun control. There were a few things with Reagan where he was not an abysmal piece of shit, but with Trump, he's just taking being an abysmal piece of shit to a whole new level that I have never even thought possible. So yeah, Crowley agrees. So anyway, I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with this. I hadn't planned on doing anything, so I just wanted to jump on and rant. So anybody on Twitter want to say anything? There's let me check something here. There was something else I wanted to discuss as long as I was coming on. Okay, I'm trying to think. Boy, I should probably prepare, but I'm not up to preparing. Oh yeah, this whole thing about Canada and Greenland and the economic. One thing I wish, like the media did not ask about tariffs. Like they didn't talk about tariffs before the election. They didn't explain what tariffs are, and like there is a case for tariffs. Sometimes tariffs are good. Sometimes tariffs are bad. I say tariffs are like fire. And so it's like, if you say I'm going to set the curtains on fire, I would be like, no, that's stupid, you're going to burn down the house. And then they would say, but fire is good, how are you going to cook your food without fire? And it's like, okay, you're not going to cook your food by setting the curtains on fire. And that's like they have to, that's how bad their logic is with tariffs. It's like, yes, tariffs are good, and yes, tariffs can be used to protect a certain industry so that you can develop that industry, and yes, they can, in that case, bring back jobs. But not everything that they're putting you can't just put a 25% tariff on everything. That's like putting everything on fire to cook your food instead of just turning on the stove. So the oh, interesting. I think he's right. 1847 Ireland 100% changed American trajectory, and yeah, that's when that was like a big wave of Irish, and now I think like 30% of Americans have Irish ancestry or something like that. But anyway, so the thing about tariffs is like, and I'm bringing this up for a reason, right? There's if you go back and you look at the history of Taiwan, I think is a good place to look at this. They had Taiwan back when they first, escaped from mainland China, and they were setting up their society and economy and everything. They had a guy come along, and he came up with this idea, and this was back in the Stone Ages when we still used calculators. And he's, if you've never been to Taiwan, you don't really know Taiwan. It's basically a rock. There's not a lot of natural resources there. And so his thought was, our one national resource is people. We have a lot of people. And, there's some like fishing industry and stuff in some places, but it's not like America where it's like just a wealth of natural resources and everything. But how do you compete with the rest of the world when you're just starting off on things? So what he did is he set a massive tariff on calculators, and he didn't put a tariff on anything else. It was just calculators, right? So everything else came in, everything else was cheap, and everything else was fair, and nobody got pissed off about the calculators because nobody cared about calculators, right? But what happened is then they started to produce calculators, and they were if you grew up, or if you were like around in the 80s, even the 70s and 80s and 90s, before computers started to take over, and then you had smartphones and everything. But there was a time, like for like 20 years, if you had a calculator, it was made in Taiwan. Like most of the calculators in the world were made in Taiwan. They became this huge exporter of calculators, and they did that by putting these massive tariffs on calculators, and they turned their whole little island into like a calculator capital of the world, and they started exporting all these calculators, and it became the foundation of their economy. And what they would do is, once they had the cornerstone on calculators, they would move into other things, and they would, they took the tariff off calculators once they became a major exporter of it, so that they wouldn't get tariffs put on their calculators, and they were good because that's all they did. But then I think there's Samsung maybe if I'm right. I think Samsung is an evolution of that calculator industry. Um, and I don't know who Lisa Su or Jason Huang are. Or unless is Jason Huang the one guy? Anyway, um, so uh, that's an effective use of tariffs, and there is a way to use tariffs, and that's why Joe Biden put a tariff on chips after the Chips Act, not potato chips, but computer chips, and processors, and so the whole point of tariffs is to build up a specific industry, not to just like declare trade wars and stuff. So what Trump is doing is literally the opposite. He is basically now putting tariffs on everything but processing chips, because that's the thing that Biden put the tariffs on. And so if Biden did it, he's got to undo it. He's got to take the opposite position. Whatever Biden did, he's got to do it the opposite, because, that's just the kind of knee-jerk reaction that he has to everything. He's that fucking dumb. So, okay, there's a whole conversation. Sorry, I'm reading this conversation on YouTube right now. Oh, I see. There's like people that know each other. Or anyway, sorry, I got distracted. But anyway, so that's the whole tariffs thing. And now, so he's starting this trade war, and in the trade war, he just out of nowhere decides that Canada is our enemy or whatever. And he literally was like talking about what kind of idiot put this deal together, when he was literally the idiot who put that deal together, with the trade deal that we have with Canada. And so he says he's just gonna, start adding this tariff onto Canada, and let's make Canada the 51st state. Ah, okay. Well, I got my other camera to work. Okay. Anybody still here? I didn't lose everybody. Okay. Let me see if I can do this. That was all very weird. Okay. Okay. Hey, we're back and better than ever. Okay, now let's go here. All right. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by me, the he's tariffing. Is tariff? Can you make a verb out of tariff? Tariffing. And hey, I got some agreement. Yes. His hate of his opponents make him do things in spite of. Well, I'm not quite sure how that was going to end, but in spite of whether it's right or wrong or whatever. But it's just insane. It's just insane that we are starting a trade war with our closest ally and our closest allies because, Trump is too stupid to know things. And so what I want to know is, why isn't the media asking about this? Like, how come the media isn't saying, this isn't what you ran on? Where did you run on this? Would you have been elected if it had been like, yeah, I'm going to start a trade war with Europe and Canada? What would all the financial advisors have been saying about that? Like, why is it that we just totally refuse to acknowledge the stupidity that he's doing in the media? How do we get control of the narrative? Again, it's like he's sort of just bullied everyone into like being afraid to speak or whatever. And, it's like people are so afraid that they're not going to get access that they just don't do news anymore. But it was like that before. Like they were afraid he was going to win and they were going to get punished. So, I don't know. I think, use your power. Like media matters. Is it medium? Not media matters. What's the? Oh goodness gracious, my brain is not working that well. The one that Ron Flapowski and those guys do. I can't think of the name of it right off the top of my head, which is sort of an indictment of me. But I mean, like they are really good. They're not afraid. They like to challenge Trump. They're booming. They're like passing up Joe Rogan's podcast now, which, that's another thing. By the way, just, as long as I'm just on a rambling journey here, his whole thing about how he's not going to Canada because of political reasons. And it's just like, and people were like, oh, if Kamala Harris had gone on Joe Rogan, she would have won. It's like, no, she wouldn't have. Like, and do you really think that any of that was realistic or genuine? Do you think that if he really wanted to have her on there, he wouldn't have waited until a few days before the election and said, yeah, but it's got to be in Austin and it's got to be like 1 hour and you have to like, take an entire day of your campaign to come be on my show, in the last week of the campaign? And do you really think that if she had done that it would have made a difference in the final outcome? Do you think people listening to Joe Rogan would have been like, yeah, wow, that's great. Yeah, Midas touch. Thank you, Paul. If all of that had happened, would she have just lost a day of campaigning? I mean, because as soon as she left, they would be talking about like he might not challenge her while she was there, and afterwards, he would sit there and he would sit there and say a bunch of nonsense about how she didn't know what she was talking about and blah 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 and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's just nonsense. I think the thing with like Joe Rogan and that kind of thing is he's not really a news podcast. He's an entertainment podcast. And I think that people that listen to it are not that well informed. And so he can have somebody that comes on and misinforms them. And then everybody's like, yeah, vaccines are bad. Boy, why aren't people listening to this guy? And it's because they don't actually know what they're talking about. And they're not having somebody on there that knows what they're talking about to like tell them, this guy does not know what he's talking about. And they act, they're like, well, he invented the vaccine. No, he did not invent the vaccine. He didn't. He came up with a concept, and that concept was, part of what the vaccines were built on. But he never worked directly with that vaccine at all, or any vaccine, period. So yeah, Joe Rogan is what ignorant people think is a smart person, and what smart people realize is an ignorant person. He's not. If I were to talk to him, I would just say, like something like MMA is fake and everybody knows it, because it's not fake, and he knows it's not fake. And anybody that knows what, like that really knows MMA would be like, no, it's ridiculous. It's like, it's just like professional wrestling. It's the same thing. It's just, and you could just sit there well, that's just what they want you to think. Anytime he said anything, yeah, well, that's just what they want you to think. And it's like that kind of logic is all they do, is they just say stupid shit. And then if you counter the stupid shit, then they're like, oh, well, that's just what they want you to think. And it's like, who is they? Who cares? So I would, and since MMA matters to him, that's the only reason I would choose MMA, is because he actually does know something about it and he cares about it. And so having like that whole kind of conspiracy theory nonsense, bashing MMA would probably make him really, really upset. And then he might think, oh, hey, maybe some of this other stuff that I do is really not that smart. Anyway. But probably not, because that would require him having a moment of reflective thought, which is something that no MAGA is capable of doing. So anyway, okay, I'm on a tangent of a tangent of a tangent. So let's go back to Canada, because I think that's how I got on Joe Rogan and him not going to Canada, which is related to the whole tariff war thing. And so back to the tariffs. That's where we were. We were on the tariffs. I've managed to retrace my steps, and now I know where I was going. Where I am going is, why didn't the media talk about tariffs? And not just, like actually talk about tariffs. When I say talk about tariffs, I don't mean just say the word tariffs. I mean, explain what tariffs are, and how they work, and like the actual history. Like, why did they not talk about tariffs? The fact that like almost immediately after the election, the number one Google thing was, what are tariffs, tells you that nobody knew what tariffs are and how they work. And that, if people knew what they were and how they work, they may have voted differently. Certainly enough people that would have changed the outcome of the election is a realistic possibility. And I say that because people were very upset and Googling it, right? They're like, oh, why is this leopard eating my face? So anyway, this is what's been bothering me about the media and their coverage of things, including everything from the tariffs before the election to Signalgate now, is that they cover things in a way where, well, here's Trump's side and here's, the Democrat side, instead of like, this is just true. They don't need to go into what's not true. You don't need to go into what's not true. If you say what's true, what's not true. And if you tell people this is what true is, then they just know what is not true, because it's not true. And like this, there's no discussion about whether or not what kind of plane you're using to strike Yemen with, and when it's leaving, and what kind of bombs they're going to be using, and who the guy they're bombing at, they know where he is. All of that is extremely classified information, and everybody knows that should be classified information. And if the press secretary says that's not classified, they should just say, yes, it is. They shouldn't be, arguing about or having like these, is it classified? Should it be classified? Or, is it, an attack or is it a war plan? Like, these are distinctions that don't matter. And it's like, come on, people. So, all right, you go run your fence line, Mr. Crowley. Thank you for watching and being with me. I appreciate that. I wish I had a fence line to run and the energy to do it with. Anyway, so the media, how do we get the media back? Maybe I need to look into that. Like, I don't know how to get the media back. My mom was a journalist. I'm glad. I mean, I'm not glad she's dead, but I'm glad she's not alive to watch this. It's insane. It is insane that where we are. There was when I was in college as a freshman, I took this course on how to study, it was called, and it was like really cool. Like it taught you like literally how to study, like how to take notes in class, how to read a textbook, and it's like, you think, oh, how do you read a textbook? You open up the book and you read it. But like, if you ever took any college classes, you have to buy your own textbook, right? And then there's these really wide columns in there, and that's for taking notes. And like, there's a way that you can go through and what we were taught is you read a paragraph and then you ask a question. You write a question to yourself, like if you read a question about the Second Amendment, and then you would write a question about what is the Second Amendment in the column there, and then you highlight the answer to that question in the paragraph. So you write a question, you summarize the paragraph in your mind, and then you write a question that addresses what is the summary of that paragraph. Then you highlight the response to that question, and then when you're ready to study for your exam, you don't go through and reread the entire book. You go through and you just read the questions, and you kind of, those basically become sample questions for when you're taking the test. And I mean, it was like, I went through college with 4.0. I mean, it was all because of that how to study class. Like, if you really learn how to study, studying actually becomes pretty easy. So anyway, again, I get distracted, but why not? So our instructor, our professor, she said, if a student fails a class, it's the student's fault. If the entire class fails, it's the teacher's fault. And she was talking about, that because sometimes, you'd have these teachers that would pride themselves on how many people they failed and how hard it was to get an A. And she was like, no, if you're a good teacher, you should have, like about 10 to 20% of your class should get A's. If 10% of your class isn't getting A's, that means you're doing a crappy job of teaching. And if nobody fails your class, that means you're doing a crappy job of teaching. And I was thinking about that in terms of this, with the election where nobody knew anything. I did a whiteboard video on Kamala Harris's policies, and then somebody said in that video, why isn't she saying any of these things? And I'm like, where do you think I got it from? This is what she's been saying. But the media would not report what she was saying. They would just sit there and talk about, why isn't she going on podcasts? Instead of saying, this is what her policies are. And instead of, Donald Trump and what he was, doing, they would sit there and they debate whether or not, like, whether or not tariffs were good. And so nobody really knew what either candidate was actually doing. And it just became about personalities, and not even their real personalities, the personalities as presented by the media. And so basically the electorate failed the test. And when the entire country fails, that's the media's fault. And this was not like the kind of election where it's left or right, Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. This was a right and wrong test. One of the fuckers had gotten convicted of felonies and tried to overthrow the country before. This was not a left or right situation. This was a right or wrong situation. And the nation chose wrong because the media did not properly inform them. So I don't know how to get that back. I really don't. I think the answer is in independent media, but when you have independent media, you lose access, right? And you lose funding. You lose, like am I independent media? I in some ways I would say I'm independent media. But I'm just a dude with a podcast and a Twitter account and a Blue Sky account. And I might have more followers than the average Joe. But I mean mine's in the hundreds of thousands, not in the millions. So there's no way I'm going to have the impact of the president of the United States. I've got like 76 people watching this right now. Like, you think you know what I'm saying? Like, independent media is very limited, and it's like you have Midas Touch is the only one that has any impact. And anyway, so just had to get on and talk about all that stuff. So anyway, does anybody want to say anything? Journalism before the election was just horse race. Nobody got time to explain because they just want to report. And they don't even want to report. They want to commentate, I depending on how old you are, you may or may not remember. But like back in the day, back in the pre-internet days, and you look at the newspapers, they would have you'd look at the newspaper and they'd have a whole feature on who to, on what the different candidates stood on different policies. And there would be like, they'd have like their pictures, and then they'd have, like gun control and education or whatever. They'd have all, healthcare, and they'd have all the things that they were for. And then you might have like an opinion piece on each of them, and then like you'd have an editorial endorsement. But there was something that was just devoted to the facts of these are what these candidates are for, and it was always presented in a way that like the candidate would say, like I think that the candidates would actually present this is what they were for, somebody from their staff. So it wasn't done in a way that was critical or anything like that. That would be for the opinion piece. And it's like people didn't know. People just didn't know what Kamala Harris was for, and they didn't know what Donald Trump was for. And everybody that paid attention and did any research knew that Project 2025 was Donald Trump's whole thing. And then Donald Trump would say, "Oh, I don't know anything about Project 2025." And it's like, yes, if you don't, it doesn't really matter, because Stephen Miller does, and the guy that you chose for vice president does, and the people that are going to be sitting there, actually being president while you pretend to be president and play golf and just occupy the White House. Like, the people that are actually going to be making decisions are all 100% not just for Project 2025, like they're the authors of it. So I don't really care if you're running away from it or not. And, like the media should have been pushing back on that instead of been talking about why wasn't Kamala Harris going on the Joe Rogan podcast. And yeah, the money is on the right, and the oligarchs are on the right, and, the oligarch of oligarchs is on the right. So there's that. I think in 2016 there were several sites that did this, but many were with his lies and disinformation. Yeah, there's just like you have to find truth now, and it's like that was like websites. I think if you're going on a website to read about the news, you're already in a place that most people aren't. I think that there is in our society right now with the anti-labor movement since Reagan and just traffic and the increased attention to raising your kids and everything. Like when I grew up, I mean, it was like, we raised ourselves. Now it's like kids don't even do their own homework. It's, their parents do it for them. And so, and like there's soccer practice and there's all this stuff. And I think that most people right now, and I'm not really trying to defend every red hat wearing MAGA that there is, but I think that they're exhausted, and so and they're dumbed down from exhaustion. And so, like, I wonder how, because I think about this because I'm like, I know people that are smart in other areas of their life, like I know people that got like law degrees from University of Chicago or MBAs from the University of Chicago, and people that are otherwise very, very smart, but they're still dumb when it comes to Trump. And it's like, why is it that their brain just fundamentally turns off when it comes to politics, and especially when it comes to right-wing, politics? And I think it's just because they're exhausted. I mean, you work. If you live in a city, you have to deal with traffic. You've got your kids. You've got to come home. You got to make food. You've got to, everything. And so by the time you're done with everything, you're just exhausted and you just want to sit down and watch TV. And so I mean, that's why shows like Big Bang Theory, or actually Big Bang Theory wasn't that bad, but like the Chicago Med or whatever. It's like a lot of shows that just require almost zero thought at all to watch are popular. And and then a lot of these shows that are on broadcast networks like ABC and NBC and CBS, like they're like a lot of cop shows, and they're they have a subtle right-wing bias. There was one I was watching, the Landman, and they had with what's his name on it. Not Tommy. Billy Bob Thornton. Is that it? Is that his name? Yeah, Billy Bob Thornton, and he's plays the land guy, and so there's this young lawyer, hotshot lawyer, and they're out driving around, and she's like talking about wind energy, and he pulls over the truck and he points to a windmill and he says, these things are only good for powering the oil, and that's the only reason they're out here, is just so we can get the oil. The oil is the real energy, and it's far more efficient. And by the time this windmill runs out, it won't even produce as much energy as it costs to build it, which is a common right-wing talking point that's been thoroughly debunked over and over again. It is not true that windmills do not, end up producing more energy than they cost to make. It's not even remotely true. It's just a flat-out lie, and it's based on really, really specious logic. And anybody that knows anything about it is going to know that. But of course, in the fictional narrative, where the the liberal lawyer gets schooled on the truth, she's just sitting there, she doesn't know how to respond to that. And so then Bob McMaga is sitting there in his recliner going, yeah, see, he showed her. And that is part of the issue, is that they're getting their politics and their information not from the media anymore, but from fictional TV shows. There was an episode of Blue Blood, and both of these episodes, by the way, if you're asking, in case you're wondering, both of these episodes, I stopped watching the TV show after that because I just couldn't deal with it. There was an episode of Blue Bloods where Tom Selleck is like, they're driving, there was a big thing on stop and frisk, and they're driving past this guy, and Tom Selleck says, stop the car. And then they get out of the car, and there's a reporter there, and then he goes over there, and and he frisks this guy, and he finds a gun. Of course, it's a white guy that he's frisking, and so and he see, this is why we need stop and frisk. And it's like, yes, in your little fictional narrative, in this little fictional thing you made up, it looks like your side of the story works. So when Donald Trump goes on stage in the debate and talks about how we need to bring back stop and frisk, then it's like people are like, why are you saying that's racist? And it's because most of the times that stop and frisk happens, it ends up not producing a gun. They find other stuff, like they might find pot, and if they find pot on a black guy, they're going to arrest him, and if they find black pot on a white guy, they're just going to tell him to go home. And this has like been proven, and they don't have the reporter who's been covering this story and would know all this stuff in a real situation coming back to Tom Selleck and saying, like rebutting this and saying, this is the one time, or that, somehow just out of the corner of your eye, you could see this bulge in this guy's waistband and you knew that there was a gun there. Like, bullshit. The whole thing is bullshit, but it's fictional bullshit. So you can make the story whatever you want. When you make something, when you write fiction, you are God. You can make it however you want. Reality doesn't need to apply. And so when you're talking about an entire political movement where reality doesn't need to apply, fiction is a great place to instruct them. And that's what's happened. It's like people aren't getting their news from websites. They're getting their news either from Fox News, where the whole point is to lie, or they're getting it from Blue Bloods, or they're getting it from Landman, or they're getting it from Chicago Fire or whatever. So anyway, hey, Greg, how you doing? It doesn't help that issues are getting more complex and fixes are getting less intuitive. Yes, and that's another thing is it's like some things are just complicated. And like renewable energy is one of those things, and it's like there is some merit to, well, some of the stuff you need to mine, and like there is this kind of trade-off of, okay, you got to mine to get this stuff, and that's going to take energy. And then you've got to, after how long is it going to last, how much is it going to store? But you can't sit there and go, you can't project that as a uniform thing out for the next 30 years, because how are you going to improve on it if you're not already doing it? And it's not like you're going to sit there and in 10 years of using oil and increasing the CO2 on the planet, that all of a sudden you're gonna boom magically figure out some kind of solution to it. You're gonna find a solution to it by learning and by studying and by trying, and maybe sometimes failing, and then maybe sometimes not failing, and gradually you'll get better. It's like electric cars, for instance. We've added, there was a time when you couldn't get more than 100 miles on one. Now we've gotten electric cars with 500 miles, and it's like if you can go, how many people even want to drive 500 miles in a day? And it's like 500 miles on one, you go, if you drive 500 miles in a day, you're going to spend some of that time at a rest stop, right? You're going to stop, and if you were in a car, you would stop and gas up, and then you'd go in, you'd use the bathroom, you'd get something to eat, you'd walk around, and what is that? Anyway, one of those big, huge truck stops, and look at stupid hats or whatever, get a souvenir, get some potato chips and some soda, get back in the car 25 minutes later. Well, in that 25 minutes, you wouldn't be filling up your car with gas the whole time, but you could be charging it that whole time. And now with a lot of these cars, you can get like, another 300 miles in 20 minutes. Like the first burst of charging comes a lot faster. So, you could basically, if you have a car with a good, a good range, you can drive all day in an electric car. It's not like that's a limitation anymore, but it was a limitation at one time. And when they first came out, they didn't have the acceleration and the speed. And now it's like some of the sportiest cars on the planet are electric cars. Even an average electric car is sportier than most gas-powered cars. So the point I'm making is that things get better, and so you can't like evaluate the impact on climate change just based on what we have right now and projecting that over 25 years. It's like over 25 years, if that is where we're investing, things will get better. So are issues more complex? I think the nuances are more complex, but like you say, it seems that they are the same. Tax the rich, still not done. Protect the environment, air and water, now rolled back. I think that in some ways, like the buckets haven't changed, but the nuances of some of them are a little more are a little different. I think that some things have not changed at all and have gotten worse, like you're saying, like tax the rich, the war on labor, the war on apostrophes is new, but yeah, because anyway, the war on apostrophes is something I like to joke about because of the your thing. And anyway, I don't. You can tell a MAGA by the fact that they just seem to hate apostrophes. I don't know why. The only thing that is more complex is the propaganda on the right, supported by Russia and oligarchs. That is certainly more complicated, and the like the filtering out of propaganda. Like it used to be we would recognize propaganda, but now we don't. And actually, one thing I want to start looking into is the psychology of politics. I think that there's a psychological element to some of this stuff, and especially like with Trump and the MAGAs, I think that there's a tendency to double down, like a kind of sunk cost aspect to it, to where, okay, I've stuck with Trump all of this time, and so now if I admit I'm wrong, I have to admit I'm a complete fucking moron, and I don't want to admit I'm a complete fucking moron, so I'm just whatever happens. Donald Trump could run around nude and say that he's a parrot, and I would just agree that he's a nude parrot and everybody should be running around nude. Like, it doesn't matter what he does now. I say Donald Trump is the Overton window, and I think it's just he just all of a sudden one day woke up and decided Canada was our enemy and Russia was our ally, and every single MAGA is ready to agree with him. And it's just like, like, as stupid as that is, that's where they're at. So Greg says the fundamentals are still pretty straightforward, and then Paul says LOL. But I don't know if the LOL was at the fundamentals are pretty straightforward, or if it was about me talking about Donald Trump running around nude as a parrot, which, by the way, is not anything anybody, including Melania, ever wants to see. Ugh. So, but yeah. It's I think there has definitely been a trend towards oligarchy, and that is accelerating at this point. I was doing some math the other day, and there are 13 billionaires in Trump's cabinet, and that's not even including Musk, who's not in his cabinet, but I mean has this kind of pseudo cabinet position. The entire Biden cabinet was worth had a combined net worth of less than $100 million, which is still a lot of money, right? Like, I mean, that's still a lot of change, but it's nothing compared to what Trump's cabinet is worth. It is by so far and away the wealthiest cabinet ever in the history of the planet, or in the history of the country. And that's not like RFK Jr., like the Kennedys. There was a time when they were part of the wealthy elite, and I don't know if they're still included in that, but RFK Jr., he's like the popper of the bunch. Oh, at the apostrophe war. Yes. I'm glad. We need to stop the apostrophe war. The war on apostrophe. I don't know what it is. And it's like it started off with the your thing, but it seems to have extended into all kinds of things. And I have a thing about apostrophe. When people talk about the 70s, like back in the 70s and the 70 apostrophe S, it's like, so the 70s owned this? Is that like, anyway, it's 70s, by the way. But you can almost always tell a MAGA by the misuse of apostrophes. Like 83% of the time an apostrophe is misused. There's an 83% chance that it's a MAGA. That's a scientific number. Anyway. So I'm just rambling incoherently now. But anyway, I wanted to get on and just kind of chat with my cat. That's what I should call this podcast now. I should call it a chat with my cat. So Care Bear just seemed to have napped basically the entire time. I don't know what's wrong with him. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you around on the internet verse. Talk to you later.